Lorcana is a realm of imagination that exists far, far away in a distant dimension. This realm begins and ends with the Great Illuminary, the repository for all stories ever told. Without it, these stories would be lost to time and forgotten. The Great Illuminary was created by the Curator, a mysterious figure who wished to gather and reimagine the stories of this realm by harnessing the power of story stars. He would use the contraptions of the Great Illuminary to couple the light of the stars with the magical ink to create copies of powerful beings known as Glimmers. These Glimmers would recount their stories to the Curator, who would record. Additionally, items also known as Glimmer or lore could also be created, such as Peter Pan's dagger. Lore is classified as significant items that are fragments of a larger story. The ink used to create Glimmers would become the source of Lorcana's power. However, the Curator found his work to be too much for just one person, so he began recruiting apprentices, whom he dubbed the Illumineers. After untold ages, the Curator and his Illumineers mysteriously vanished, leaving the Great Illuminary abandoned. But eventually, a power deep within the Illuminary awakened and called out to extraordinarily creative minds to gather and become the new Illumineers to continue collecting and preserving lore, therefore allowing the Glimmers to return to the Great Illuminary once more. When the Illumineers arrive at the Great Illuminary, they are given an ink caster, which allows them to wield the 6 magical inks and create Glimmers, which add lore to Lorcana, a power that the Curator believed must be protected no matter the cost. These 6 magical inks are Amber, Amethyst, Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire, and Steel. Amber Glimmers are purposeful, patient, and dedicated. They're able to pursue causes and ambitions with single-minded persistence. They often work within communities, either from above as a leader or from within as a healer, bodyguard, or just a loyal follower. Amethyst Glimmers are wondrous, for this is the otherworldly ink of sorcerers, sages, animated objects, and other Glimmers who use their special powers to achieve their aims. They are incredibly powerful when they have access to their amazing abilities, but may land in trouble if they're stripped of those or tap into power they can't control. Emerald Glimmers are flexible. Gifted with the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, they are never caught off guard. Quick thinking, but not necessarily book smart, they navigate their environment, whether physical or social, natural or artificial, with ease. Ruby Glimmers are daring. They use their speed and bravery to defy the odds. They are often warriors, explorers, and daredevils. Sapphire Glimmers are intellectual. Intelligent and creative, they excel at strategy, invention, and the arts. They can almost always know something, plan something, or invent something that will win the day. Steel Glimmers are strong. Large and imposing, armored, or just plain powerful, Steel Glimmers can apply huge amounts of brute force to get the job done. With the power of the 6 magical inks behind them, the new generation of Illumineers began with a small group of people: Shanzay, Martin, Venturo, and, of course, you, the player. Shanzay summons a glimmer of the true hero, Hercules, and the new Illumineers begin their work, summoning a glimmer of Mickey Mouse who would greet any and all to the Great Illuminary's halls. Additionally, many magic brooms were summoned to care for the Great Illuminary while the Illumineers did their work. A dream-born glimmer of Mickey Mouse, simply known as Detective, began to find evidence of foul play within the Great Illuminary, discovering seaweed covered in ink throughout the halls. Following this, Basil would begin looking into the situation as well, depicted in Basil, Perceptive Investigator. Some time passed and Venturo began deciphering the meaning and functionality of various artifacts contained within the Great Illuminary, including the Sumerian Talisman and the Lucky Dime. Elsewhere, Martin discovered a hidden room deep within the Great Illuminary. There he found a lore book covered in barnacles, seaweed, and surrounded by dark tendrils. The lore book played the beginning of a melody, and with his guitar Inkcaster, Martin figured out the rest of the song, and by playing it, he unlocked the sealed lorebook and outburst a cascade of dark ink, which then flowed into the Great Hall where Venturo and Basil were examining the talisman. Basil was overwhelmed and transformed or shifted into a new alternate version of himself known as the Great Mouse Detective and flew away to escape the ink. All around him, Venturo saw Glimmers transform due to the flood, but he was being swept away. He then saw Martin, who was distracted and reaching for King Triton's trident within the flood. But eventually Martin heard his friend and was able to save him. A torrent of ink poured throughout the Great Illuminary and down into the Inklands. This flood of ink created Floodborn throughout the world, empowering the Glimmers and transforming them into more powerful alternate versions of themselves. This would further push the idea of Floodborn Glimmers to the extreme, with the likes of Cinderella Stout-Hearted, turning Cinderella from a fragile princess into a hardened warrior. Paired with Fairy Godmother Mystic Armorer, Cinderella becomes a formidable champion of Lorcana. This theme also extends to Belle, who becomes an archer, filling the rogue archetype of the fantasy genre, which works well with Cinderella, who has become her own knight in shining armor. Following the flood, the investigation of the cause began in earnest, with Chief Bogo taking the lead in the case, with other Glimmers continuing to assist like Cobra Bubbles, Elsa, Judy Hopps, and Peter Pan, who was tasked with finding the missing lorebook that caused the flood. Meanwhile, other characters ventured into the Inklands like Pinocchio and Kit Cloudkicker. Various Glimmers also began noticing changes in others, as shown in Cheshire Cat, always grinning. Prince Charming roamed the Inklands searching for Cinderella, while others helped in the search for lore lost in the flood. While searching, Ariel even found a hidden Inkcaster hinting at the whereabouts of the lost Lumineers. The third set in Lorcana is very much one of adventure and exploration. As the search for lore, more specifically the Lucky Dime, begins, this sense of adventure is at the forefront, especially with the introduction of locations and the choice of the legendaries like Jim Hawkins, Robin Hood, and Milo Thatch. With much of their lore lost, Venturo decided to lead a band of Glimmers to recover the lore for the Great Illuminary. The group traveled in an ink runner and wielded an Aurelian gyro sensor to point the way to lost lore. Venturo, alongside Prince Eric, Audrey Ramirez, and Tinkerbell, ventured into the Inklands. While there, Venturo was able to recover the Sumerian talisman, and Tinkerbell found King Triton's trident. Tink points the group in the direction of the powerful lore weapon. However, Venturo alters course, instead choosing to follow the gyro sensor to locate the Lucky Dime, which gave a mysterious shadow the opportunity to claim the trident for themselves. While many Glimmers were heroic allies of the Illumineers, some had more villainous ambitions. The Queen of Hearts was short-sighted, looking to nab lore books during the flood and expand her territory into the Inklands. Lawrence thought he could steal a crown or two within this new world, and Madame Medusa would hoard as much lore as she could for herself. But others had grand plans. Ursula, deceiver of all, began collecting the most powerful lore as part of her scheme. At that same time, Ursula Sea Witch began recruiting other villainous Glimmers to assist her. She attempted to sway Nessus, but he refused her offer and sent Flotsam and Jetsam running. However, Ursula was able to convince Hans to assist her, and he led Anna straight to the Sea Witch. Other villains like Maleficent would keep an eye on Ursula, not yet deciding what to do. The two versions of Ursula are delineated by their hair and their outfits. Deceiver of All can be seen with dashes of purple and green in her hair, highlighting the two colors that Ursula can be found in, other than Ursula Vanessa, who occupies amber. She also has green fabric cascading from the top of her blouse, green eyeshadow, and starfish earrings to further differentiate her from the other Ursula Glimmer. The Sea Witch eventually took possession of the Hexwell crown, and in her search for more powerful lore, she found the other Ursula, Deceiver of All, who had found the trident. Sea Witch then persuaded her doppelganger to work alongside her, and together they would rule Lorcana. However, she double-crossed her clone and took both pieces of lore for herself to rule alone. With both artifacts in her possession, she began forcefully taking control of other Glimmers' minds. Some, like Li Shang, Mulan, Louisa, Raya, Namari, and Elsa, were able to fight her off. Beast was as well, but he was infected by her, and only Belle's advanced healing sorcery combined with the Rose could heal this affliction. But in the end, Ursula was able to entangle many powerful Glimmers like Bruno, who foresaw Ursula's plan but broke the slab depicting this vision out of fear. When Ursula began putting her plan into motion, the other Madrigals searched for the prophecy that Bruno shattered, but by the time they found it, it was too late. Just as she assembled the final pieces, Mirabelle saw her uncle becoming Ursula's thrall. Ursula also entangled Prince Eric, Anna, Jafar, Minnie Mouse, Tamatoa, Triton's daughters minus Ariel, Shark, Magica Dispel, Mad Hatter, Gaston, and even the powerful Hercules. While many Glimmers would become entangled by Ursula, none would do so willingly. As seen within the story of Beast's infection, becoming entangled is a painful process, not only physically, but mentally as well. Ursula was able to strip these individuals of their individuality and free will, forcing them to follow her will instead of their own. What was most frightening about these entangled Glimmers was their familiarity. Heroes meant to save the world now threatened its well-being, and villains who wouldn't hesitate to end their foes were somehow even more disturbing and perverse than they had been before. Take a look at Luigi Aime's depiction of Tamatoa. His lifeless eyes paired with a sinister smile filled with jagged teeth is meant to inspire fear in the player, that the fear the Illumineers felt during their battles against the Sea Witch and her thralls. After entangling her Glimmers, the others weren't sure how to react. Some tried to heal them, some decided to stay far, far away, but some decided to fight. The Illumineers, alongside the Floodborn enhanced Glimmers Mulan, Ariel, and Mickey, traveled to the Sea Witch Queen's lair and battled her and her entangled Glimmers. However, Ursula, with the help of Bruno, saw them coming and sprung a trap for them. Despite all her advantages, Ursula was defeated and her trident and the Hexwell crown were destroyed. These powerful pieces of lore were recovered and placed within the Great Illuminary for safekeeping. Meanwhile, Hades was laying out his own plans to rule while the realm was distracted by Ursula. We get a few hints towards this in his various cards, where he notes that the underworld is becoming too full and he wants to expand. He sets Pain and Panic out to scout the Ursula situation for him, and then begins his plans during the battle. Following this, all of the Glimmers throw a party alongside the Illumineers to celebrate Ursula's defeat. However, the party is cut short as chunks of the Great Illuminary begin to fall from the sky, a mystery that Basil and Merlin assist the Illumineers in investigating. Basil and Martin find a secret staircase leading into the depths of the Great Illuminary, where they locate an amber talisman that Merlin had seen in a vision. A mysterious figure then approaches the half-Hexwell crown, and Martin dons the amulet, signaling the end of the first major arc of the Lorcana story, and the beginning of the next chapter. So that is the entire story of the Ursula saga, as I'll call it. I really liked what they did with the story outside and inside of the cards, and I can't wait to see what happens with the beginning of the next chapter, Shimmering Skies. I'll be sure to recap all of that as soon as we finish up this next saga. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe. It does help us out, and we'll see you when we crack the next one.